So, welcome again to this virtual press conference about the 2024 ILGA World Conference. My name is Daniele Paletta. I'm the communications manager at ILGA World. And I would like first to introduce you to our panel today. I'm just going in the order that I see here on my screen. So in no particular order, we have Julia Ehrt, who is the executive director at ILGA World. We've got the executive directors of the two host organizations that are hosting the ILGA World Conference here in Cape Town. So Matthyse from Gender DynamiX and Lentsu Nchabeleng from Iranti. And then we've got Jeffrey O'Malley from UNDP, and more precisely, the UNDP Senior Advisor on LGBTI Inclusion for Africa, while Ntuthuzo Ndzomo is the Advocacy Officer at Iranti. So once again, welcome everybody to this virtual press conference. I'm just going to give you a quick introduction on how we are structuring this whole event. I am going to ask a few questions to the various panelists just to introduce themselves to the and to help them describe for you attendees what an ILGA World Conference is and what you can expect at this event. And then in the second part of the virtual press conference, we will have a space for the Q&A for all of you journalists to actually ask whatever questions you may have. Okay, so my first question is to the ILGA World Executive Director, Julia Ehrt. And I would like her to ask, what is an ILGA World Conference and why is this event important to the LGBTI movement from the grassroots to the global level? Julia, you have the floor.
Wonderful. Thanks, Daniele, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. So ILGA World is a convener of the LGBTI movement. We are as well a membership-based organization. So ILGA World has more than 2,000 members in over 170 countries in the world. And one of the things that ILGA World is strong on and what we do is convene our movement. And we convene our movement not only in conferences as the ILGA World Conference that is going to kick off on Monday here in Cape Town, we as well convene our movement in all the work that we do, be it in the work, in our research work, in our advocacy work with international institutions, or through trainings and seminars. But the main event, the main convening event that ILGA World does is the ILGA World Conference, where we convene LGBTI activists from around the globe in one location. This convening happens every 2 to 3 years. And this year we have the pleasure of convening in Cape Town in South Africa. We are expecting a record number of attendees. We are expecting 1,400 attendees from more than 120 different countries. Usually our conferences are much smaller, but I think the number of attendees speaks as well to the moment in time that we're in. With, well, the US just moved to the right, but I think it's a pattern that we're seeing across a lot of world regions, that there is a shift to the right in political contexts, which puts increased scrutiny, pressure, discrimination, stereotyping to LGBTI movements. And I think, therefore, it is all the more important to convene our movements, to strategize, to learn from each other, and as well to provide a space in which we hold the majority.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julia. And my next question for you would be if you could describe how does an ILGA World Conference arrive in a specific country, South Africa, in this specific example, and why?
Wonderful, thanks. And so I think in order to answer that question, I need to speak a little bit of how ILGA World works internally. As I've said, we're a membership organization and we are democratically organized. So our members, our organizations again, but our members decide on key aspects of the organization. That includes our constitution, that includes electing our board, and that as well includes defining the organization's strategy. And that includes as well to decide where the World Conferences are being held. So the way how this works is at the previous ILGA World Conference, which was held in 2022 in Long Beach in California, the organization opened a call for organizations to bid to host the next World Conference, because the World Conference is not only organized by ILGA World and convenes the movement from around the world. It is co-organized between ILGA World and local host organizations that ground and root the conference in their regional, national, and local context. So in Long Beach, in 2022, we had 3 proposals where the next World Conference would be held. That was Buenos Aires, Antwerp in Belgium, and Cape Town. Well, Cape Town won the bid, and Cape Town won the bid as well because it was a collective movement decision that it was time for ILGA World as the global LGBTI federation to come back to the African continent with our conference, because we haven't been on the continent for more than 25 years. No, for 25 years. So, and our membership kind of approved that with great joy by acclamation. And then once that decision had been made, well, Iranti and Gender DynamiX were the 2 leading organizations to make that bid. ILGA World and Iranti and Gender DynamiX started, the preparations and the organization of that conference that now comes to fruition with our conference starting next week on Monday.
Thank you very much, Julia. And yes, you mentioned the host organizations, so I think it's time for them to actually come to speak about their role in this conference. And I would like to start from Liberty Matthyse, who is the executive director at Gender DynamiX. And so this is the first time that the ILGA World Conference returns to Africa in 25 years. So the question is, well, why now? And why Iranti and Gender DynamiX thought it was important for the global movement to return to Africa at this specific point.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you so much for the visibility and positive visibility that's going to be provided for the ILGA World Conference. I think that for us, and in context of what Julia has also said, that it was important to bring back the conference to Africa because it had been about 25 years since the conference was hosted on the African continent. And I think the last time that it, of course, was hosted was in 1999. And that was shortly after also South Africa transitioning into a democratic dispensation, recognizing constitutionally and legally the rights of LGBTQI+ people in this particular context. And so that was also the time in which the Bisexual Visibility Day was also celebrated for the first time. And so it was very fitting for the conference to happen at that time in South Africa, given that transition. In addition to that, I think when we are looking at where we are at currently and why it's important now, of course, a very much global north-driven anti-rights, anti-trans, anti-gender campaign is unfolding, and it's important that we recognize that it is also very much disproportionately impacting and affecting Africa, who has a very particular history on LGBTQI+ matters, and of course, in many instances, are quite exclusive when it comes to rights recognition of marginalized people, such as LGBTQI+ communities. And so I think it is very fitting that this conference happens in this context at this time as we are trying to forge greater global solidarity, amplifying our voices, being visible and seen in order to push a very clear agenda that we are here, we have always been here, and we are not going anywhere. And so what we need to do is actually co-create ways of being in the world that seeks to include LGBTQI+ people through that lens of solidarity and working together. Julia had mentioned what happened in the US context over the past couple of days in the country shifting right. And of course, for us, we're very concerned in terms of how that impacts Africa at large, and of course how it emboldens anti-gender and anti-trans movements, anti-LGBTQI plus movements to push back against human rights victories that have already been achieved. And so it's a very important, I think, checking in moment to be able to reflect on what does this moment require of us as a global movement, working with other movements in order to ensure that rights, human rights gets protected and recognized no matter the odds.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Liberty. And I was talking about again the African context and why would the conference be here in this specific moment. So my question to Lentsu and Nchabeleng, the executive director at Iranti, is precisely that. What benefit is there for LGBTI communities in South Africa specifically to have our ILGA World Conferences hosted here? And how were the local communities engaged in the process, in the run-up from the bid to actually everybody arriving here?
Thank you, Daniela, and good morning to everybody. I hope I'm audible. As we all know that often conferences are spaces to spotlight issues and areas of concerns and areas of victory of that particular country and of the participants that will be engaging in that particular conference. This also applies to the ILGA conference, where we will be hosting a number of individuals from different countries and from South Africa in particular, where we'll be highlighting and shining a spotlight on issues that needs concern and need prioritization. And as Iranti and Gender DynamiX, we are very fortunate as co-hosts to have this opportunity, to be at the forefront of, addressing these key issues. A good example of this is what happened last year, 2023, in Mauritius, where there was a decriminalization of consensual same-sex sexual acts. And it was during this time where activists in the movement were brought together to actually, give a spotlight to this milestone. And as ILGA conference, there has been a huge input to involve local communities in the process. And I believe that the communities that we've engaged in have contributed significantly to where we are as co-hosts and even to ILGA as well, to ensure that the conference contributes significantly to the concerns and areas that needs to be addressed. So it is actually a huge benefit, not only for us as co-hosts and not only for South Africans, but all the participants and delegates that will be part of this conference.
Thank you very much, Lentsu. I don't know, Ntuthuzo, if you have anything to add to this specifically.
Yeah, I think Lentsu spoke to some of the reasons why it's important for this conference to be in South Africa, as it has several benefits for us as an LGBTQI plus organization, and also for the broader LGBTQI plus movements in South Africa, but also within the region. And one of the things that I'd like to note is that the conference will give an opportunity for us to highlight, some of the challenges that, the community in South Africa, the LGBTQI plus community in South Africa faces and within the region, and also touching on a point that Liberty had mentioned, that this is also an opportunity for us to bring together activists from all walks of life around the world, for them to foster solidarity and support, especially during this period, as Julia had highlighted on the recent election results from the US. This is actually an ideal time for us to do so. But also in the past conferences of both, Pan-African ILGA and also, ILGA World, we've noticed that the conference is also a space where people can provide a platform to advocate for policy changes and legal reforms, and also an opportunity for people to share experiences and strategies with international activists, where they can perform, or be able to reflect on like their own local efforts. I'll pause there for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's one important thing to add, actually. The World Conference is really the ILGA World Conference happens during 5 days. So it will be from the Monday 11 to the Friday 15th of November. So this is 5 days where over 12,000, if not more, activists and human rights defenders and journalists, researchers, funders, donors will all come together to discuss the situations of a movement and strategize. But beyond the conference, there's actually an entire constellation of events that will take place both on site and off site. For example, starting today, there is a summit on inclusive democracies that is taking place. There's the digital security extensive training for activists that is happening today and tomorrow. There are many, many other events that are happening around the ILGA World Conference. And one of them is an absolute first, which is the International Pride Awards, which is the joint project by UNDP and ILGA World. So I'm inviting Jeffrey O'Malley, who is the UNDP Senior Advisor on LGBTI Inclusion for Africa, to tell us a little bit more about the event. How did it come together? And yes, why are we holding this event and why now?
Thanks so much, Daniele. Every single LGBTIQ person in the world who's enjoying some degree of freedom today to live their own lives, to be themselves, each of us is benefiting from the work of activism of activists who've come before us, people who've worked hard to change laws, to change social norms, to advocate for rights and inclusion. And despite the backlash we're hearing about, Liberty talked about the northern financing of anti-LGBTI and anti-gender movements in Africa and so on, we are making progress. In 1990, 60% of the countries of the world criminalized same-sex relations. And now it's down to 32%. Nchabeleng mentioned Mauritius last year. Namibia is the country in Africa which most recently decriminalized same-sex relations. And UNDP and ILGA have decided to work together to organize the International Pride Awards to recognize the activists who are driving this progress now and who've been driving this progress for many years. On next Wednesday evening, the Pride Awards will take place, and we're going to recognize 5 real heroes of the LGBTIQ equality movement. And that includes LGBTIQ activists themselves, but we're also giving an award to a prominent ally, somebody from outside our community, but who's working hard to advance human rights for all, including sexual and gender minorities. And of course, we want to honor and celebrate the contributions of the 5 awardees, but it's not just about that. We also want to really inspire the next generation of activists. We want people at the conference itself, but also via the live stream around the world. We want people to see and hear about the struggles, often in the face of great adversity, that these people are undertaking and feel inspired to take up activism themselves. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And yes, everybody is actually invited to follow the live stream, which is going to be at 7:45 p.m., if I'm not mistaken, on Wednesday 13th. And if you go to the International Pride Awards website, you will actually find all the references to actually be there with us on such a special night. Well, I'm actually turning back for the last section of this to ILGA World, because we have a very special guest here with us today. Tuisina Ymania Brown, she's our one of our two co-secretary generals. Luz Helena Aranda, who's the other co-secretary general, is now traveling to Cape Town, so she's not able to be with us today. But Ymania and Luz have really been at the helm of ILGA World for 4 years. And Ymania, you are now at the end of your second mandate as the co-secretary general of this organization, of this global organization. And these past 4 years really haven't been easy for the global LGBTI movement. There have been some victories, but also a lot of backlash. So my question to you is really, what has it been like to be at the helm of a global organization at a time of anti-rights pushback?
Thanks so much, Danielle. Can you hear me? Are you all good?
Yes,
Okay, so I've got a lot of activity around me at the DRL event. So listen, a couple of things. One, it's not just a pushback against the anti-gender movement. We also went through COVID, right? We survived a pandemic during my term as co-secretary general together with Luz. And that involved a lot of, rescheduling and, the work that continues to be done. Listen, ILGA World has always existed for nobody else but its members. It doesn't exist for its allies. It doesn't exist for governments. It doesn't exist for member states of the UN. It exists for the work that is done by its members, first and foremost, right? That's what we pay attention to, is to our members and our membership, because they're the ones that actually allow us the opportunity to fight for their rights. Secondly, here's some things like, for me at the top of my head, because of the recent election results from the United States, right? We've already noticed a contraction in funding for LGBTI work before the results were published. We've noticed it in Europe. We've noticed it in other countries as well. So what we need to do as a movement is, one, right? We now need to be the activists that we were born to be. The only way for us to change the future is for us to dream of a better future. Our ancestors did that, right? The ones that came before me did that. The co-secretary generals of ILGA World that came before me did that. I'm standing here as co-secretary general, the first trans woman to be co-secretary general of ILGA World, right? Because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants that came before me. Next, my shoulders will be the ones that somebody else will stand on. That's how we make change as a movement. That's how we change the world. Okay, we remember, and I've always said this before, right? I have the vision. I had the vision to join ILGA and ILGA World because my ancestors have memory. I am the embodiment of my ancestors fighting for their human rights, and I am here, right? I have that vision because they have memory. And so kudos to our ancestors. All of this pushback that we're seeing now, right? All of this pushback that we're seeing now, it's because we have been speaking about intersectionality for 5 years, 6 years since it became an issue, but we don't practice it. We do not practice intersectionality. We say we do, we use the term, we coin the phrase, but we don't. The pushbacks that are coming for us is as a result of that. We need to, one, right, remove the silos in our movement, right? We cannot fight as silos and divided. We cannot do that. We need to be united. Look at Jeffrey's presentation, right? We have now repealed marriage equality laws across the world in a large number of countries, and we didn't do that as silos. We did that together as a movement. That is how we push back. I want all the trans organizations in South Africa, in Cape Town or in Johannesburg, when the Rape Crisis Center down the road, right, is having a day, I want them to turn up and help them. Help the women, right? Help the women in our communities. I want them to turn up to climate justice events, right? Help the climate justice warriors in their fights, because you know why? They're going to turn up for our fights. That's how we win this. That's how we push back. And it's so important to me because, everybody was crying yesterday. We were giving hugs here in Cape Town because it reverberated around the world, right? And my point is, we are human rights defenders. We now get to defend the wins that we've made. now's the time for us to rise and defend. That's the first thing. We're not going to have any more wins at the moment, given the current environment. But first thing, we defend, right? And then we become human rights activists and we reactivate the battles that are going on. That's most important. And I wish ILGA World and the new co-secretary generals all the best. It has been my absolute honor to support Julia, who's our current executive director, and also Andre Duplessis, who is the former one, and myself and Luz, two, Global South, women of color, one a trans woman, one a lesbian bisexual woman, have led this organization for the last 5 years since 2019, right? Two, like we didn't want to be thrown into the spotlight. All of a sudden we're here. So all I'm saying to us is as a movement, let's now remove the silos. Let's move forward one step at a time, and let's get on with the business of defending our human rights and being activists and fighting for our human rights. I hope that answers your question, Daniele. I don't know if it did, but as I said, I'm happy to take any questions from anybody. And yeah, thank you so much for the honor, right? The honor that's being bestowed on me and my people to lead this amazing organization that I have absolute faith will do amazing work even after I'm gone. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your words, Ymania. And yes, so I guess now is the time where we open the floor to the questions from all the journalists in attendance, and yeah, you're welcome to raise your hands and come on camera or post your questions here in the Q&A section. You could use having actually the names and the roles of the people who spoke today. So I'm going to post them here in the chat in a very short while. I still see no questions coming up. So let me just again post the list of the people who intervened today for everybody to see. Just a reminder that we are working together with a local PR consultant who's here in the background with us, Clayton Moorer. I'm sure you received the invitation from him, so please feel free to be in touch with him at any point during the next couple of weeks. If you have any stories that you would like to develop, you can also reach out to me. My address is actually this one that I'm posting here, media@ilga.org. We have actually a media day that we are organizing during the conference. The Wednesday, 13th of November, will be the media day where every journalist who's interested can register to attend for free. Unfortunately, we're not able to grant free entry for the entire event anymore, but the media day will be the day when there are the opening plenary and the keynote speeches and the International Pride Awards, as we were mentioning yesterday. Just a few more information about the speakers that we are going to have during the 5 days of the conference. Confirmed speakers include Reverend and activist Ntuthuzo van Voort, the United Nations Independent Expert on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, Graham Reed. We will have the National Secretary for LGBTIQ Rights of Brazil, Simi Larat. We will have Menakagun Zwami and Arundhati Katyu, who are the advocates who actually led the court challenge that decriminalized consensual same-sex sexual acts in India 6 years ago. So we have really lots of amazing speakers and panelists, and of course, if you will be at the conference with us, you will have the opportunity also to connect with human rights defenders who are present, try to talk to them and collect their stories. There are really amazing stories of human rights work. And we will all be together in this conference. So this is really an amazing opportunity. And if you're interested to join in this media day, please contact either Clayton or myself, and we will definitely liaise with you to make it happen. We have a question from the attendees. With the results of the 2024 elections in the US, is there a genuine fear that the president-elect will create an unlivable environment for LGBTQIA individuals in the States and abroad? I turn the question to our panelists.
I'm happy to respond, and then someone else can take it forward, I think. So with the elections in the US, yes, there is a genuine fear that the lives of LGBTI people and many other persons of minorities are going to be much more difficult in the US, because the President-elect Donald Trump is very likely, is opposing LGBTI rights. He's opposing rights of women. And when you look at who has voted for whom in these elections, it's kind of glaring to see that, for example, it's been Black women and LGBTI people who are most forcefully have not voted for Donald Trump, but for Kamala Harris, and there's a reason for that. And that is namely that Donald Trump is going to create an environment in the US that is going to make it very difficult for LGBTI people in the US. In addition, a person like Donald Trump is going to embolden right-wing and conservative movements to take a stronger stance against LGBTI issues, against issues around sexual reproductive health and rights and justice, and around issues pertaining to gender equality. And that, unfortunately, is not only true in the US, but that is very likely going to have a global ripple effect. What I maybe should say is going to have a huge wave that is likely going to go around the globe of emboldening anti-rights, anti-gender, right-wing actors to step up their game in opposing rights of LGBTI people, opposing rights of women, opposing sexual reproductive health and rights in other countries. And then finally, and that is something that we are seeing the effects already now, Donald Trump is likely going to install what is called the gag rule, namely that is a rule that US development assistance cannot be used to advance sexual reproductive health and rights, which is going to have an incredibly detrimental effect on social justice movements, in particular in the global South. In the last gag rule, LGBTI issues were not directly affected, but of course, due to our very close proximity and the many collaborations that we have with sexual reproductive health and rights movements, LGBTI issues are affected have been affected by that rule in the past. However, it is not an unlikely scenario that rule will be extended to other issues. Namely trans issues possibly, or maybe even LGBTI issues. Of course, that is speculation at this point in time, but given the track record and the history of Donald Trump and the recent Republican Party in the US, it's not a far-fetched scenario that something like this is going to happen. So the bottom line of this is that social justice movements, including LGBTI movements, are going to suffer deeply, both in the US and globally, from the election results in the US.
Thank you, Julia. I see Jeffrey also has his hand up, and Liberty as well. So I will go ahead in this order to give you the floor.
Thanks, Julia, and thank you for the question. I just want to mention that we also had a recent election in Botswana. And the new president in Botswana is a human rights lawyer with a long history of championing equality for all, including LGBTI persons. And I think that all around the world, again, elections happen, they have results, those results have implications. And at different times, we have leaders who are strong champions of equality and rights for all, and other leaders who are not. But the progress that's happening here in Southern Africa is very real. We have a long way to go. There's much more to do. But the the president in South Africa who was re-elected recently, again, is a very long-term and strong champion of LGBTI rights. And no head of government and no government does everything we want to happen. But it's important to recognize this is an international movement, and that a strong majority of countries in the world now support human rights for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and I'll hand it over to Liberty.
Thanks, Danielle. Just following on what Jeff has also outlined around progress that has been made, I think it's so important for us not to lose sight of that in a moment where it seems as if much can be lost. There's also still progress that can be made. And I think in context of South Africa, looking at the spillover effects, which we do know from the US is going to be real based on the funding modalities and the emboldenment of more local anti-gender oppositional forces within the country, we are seeing that they are becoming much more emboldened and pushing back in a variety of ways against the work that we are doing, particularly on the front of advancing the rights of trans and gender diverse persons. However, I think that we find hope and we really find strength that a lot of our work that we have done over the years at a societal level is paying off. If I look at a recent study that was conducted, a social study that was conducted on the attitudes of people in society on trans and gender diverse issues, it found that 72.2% actually of South Africans support non-discrimination laws and policies for trans and gender diverse persons, which is of course a massive shift in the hearts and minds of people in relation to trans and gender diverse populations. And so I think that we will continue fighting despite what the global challenges are. We will continue fighting. We will continue working with different communities, different movements in being able to ensure that we can hold on to the victories that we've been able to gain over the years and continue to position South Africa not through a South African exceptionalism lens, but rather through a human rights lens as a beacon of hope of what's possible also on the African continent for LGBTQI+ communities. And it is really heartwarming in a sense to hear, as Jeff has shared, that the incumbent president within Botswana, somebody that is human rights centered and has a consciousness for that. And so we are moving slowly but surely in the right direction, and we should never lose sight of that. And we should never lose sight of, we should never lose belief in people's ability to be able to shift their hearts and minds in alignment with human rights and basic rights that should be afforded to people simply because people are human beings.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Liberty. I know I saw Ymania had briefly her hand up, so I don't know if she wants to.
I did. No, I just wanted to add a couple of things. So a couple of things that I wanted to add to this is the United States is not the, whilst our funding is also dependent, a majority of our funding is dependent on the US. Let's be very clear about this. It is not the only country that actually funds our work, right? The European Union funds our work. The Equal Rights Coalition and its members, and it has a meeting in Berlin in December, also fund our work. The African Union, right? These are bodies that now have to step up and fill the void that has been made because of this, right? And I have absolutely no doubt, the African Union, the ERC, the EU, and all these other countries will be there to support our membership and our organizations in terms of reaching out and getting the support that we need. But what we need is, we now need to reach out and have the dialogues. We need to start talking to them. We need to start making sure that, hey, this is important for us to be able to kind of like move forward. But, you know, I don't want us to be so caught up in the US that we forget that there are other bodies out there that can help us progress and advance our causes. That's the point that I wanted to make.
Thank you. Thank you, Ymania. We've got one more question with a trigger warning, and that regards South Africa. It says, South Africa has long been a leader in LGBTQ rights. The country has been surprisingly forward-thinking on issues such as same-sex marriage, legalizing it in the middle of the late 90s. Yet gender-based violence and acts like so-called corrective rape still exist in the country. So do our panelists believe that we can create a society that allows for all individuals to live free from discrimination? And yeah, I'll probably let our panelists within South Africa respond to that. And I see Lentsu's hand up, so I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you, Daniele, and thank you for that question. It's actually quite a sensitive question because as South Africa, we come from a history of violence considering our legacy of apartheid. So there is actually quite a lot that we as people, as South Africans, we have embodied, right, in terms of violence, which often manifest in different spaces, and gender-based violence it's an example of this, where we see GBV in various spaces, from your schools to your healthcare facilities, in spaces that you are meant to be protected in, your home, even police stations. We have state actors perpetrating and inflicting violence on victims as well, and it has a long history. And often there has been a phrase that was used during COVID that referred to GBV as a shadow pandemic, that a lot happened and has been happening even. And we have failed to actually pay attention to gender-based violence as a serious, as a serious epidemic or even a pandemic. And because of the socialization of our people, and this is also rooted in history of what a woman is, what a man is, or even, gender and gender expectation and gender roles. They play a huge role in terms of perpetration of violence. It also carries a long history as well in terms of how we view women, how we view vulnerable populations. And we had a period in South Africa where corrective rape was rampant, like it was just out of hand. Not that it has stopped, but there have been different activist communities and institutions that have really spearheaded advocating and creating awareness around the issues of rape, the issues of sexual violence, gender-based violence, and sexual violence as well. And I believe that there's a lot that has been done, but there's still more to be done. And it is a battle that needs each one of us to act, to unlearn, to relearn. And it is not only confined to South Africa, it's a global crisis, it's a global issue, although it is somehow informed by, local issues that are quite different depending on the context. From a South African context, like I said, it is actually rooted in a history of violence, socialization of our people, and toxic masculinity, living in a patriarchal society, all these concepts that contributes to superiority and give certain individuals in society power, and abuse of power. And it's a complex issue, but I believe that there has been strides in addressing the issue. We still have more to do, and I believe as Iranti and GDX, perhaps it would be ideal to look at an intersectional approach of how we include, addressing sexual violence and gender-based violence in other, queer-related issues. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lentsu. And I see Liberty has also her hand up, so I'll
I think just in terms of looking forward, I think that when we are looking at the gender machinery within the country, being strengthened is one component, but of course, strengthening laws and policies within the country will not necessarily equate to the social outcomes that we require in ensuring that people are kept safe and secure and that bodily integrity is upheld. But we have made strides. Again, in the past couple of years, post the 2019 Women's March that took place in the country, in the development of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, that takes a very intersectional approach in terms of addressing issues of gender-based violence within the country. And then, of course, the National Council for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide that has been created in order to drive the strategy and to monitor programming that's being rolled out in the country to deal with issues at a community level. And that spans multiple systems and institutions within the country. And so I do think that as we are seeing that particular initiative taking a foothold within the country, we could potentially see some progress made on the gender-based violence and femicide hate crimes issues that we are consistently confronted by. And of course, noting that we would want to see that at the level of programming, but of course, programming is so heavily dependent on funding. And so it is really the vision to ensure that the National Council and the strategic plan is adequately resourced to make sure that programming can deliver the necessary services and the support measures to communities affected on the ground. And of course, when we look back at the work of the council, at the work of organizations, driving work under the strategy, that we'll 10 years from 5 years, 10 years from now, we'll be able to see a remarkable improvement on that. But I also say that very lightly in the sense that Lentsu has outlined the structural and systemic causes of inequality within the country. We have huge unemployment rates in the country. We have huge rates of inequality and poverty in the country that also needs to be confronted as a different form of violence perpetuated on people, and how that drives in itself other forms of violences within this particular context. And so it is a very complex conversation that we continuously involve ourselves in, but we are hopeful with the National Strategic Plan on gender-based violence and femicide that it can, to some degree, start shifting the needle in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Liberty. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. Yes, I see one more here. As a cishet Black man, it has a constant struggle checking my privilege and understanding my role in this battle against oppression. As a member of a marginalized group, it is easy to want to revert back to the victim role and use it to justify my own problematic ideas and behaviors. I'm super grateful for forums like this, and I wish you guys the best for the event next week, and hope we can all meet in person. Okay, I was actually just flagged now that it's not a question, so we'll take it as a comment internally. So my apologies for that. But I'm really glad. I'm really glad about the comment, and of course I will share it with all the panelists later. If then there is no other question, I think we can wrap up here unless anybody in the panelists has anything that they want to add.
No, I just wanted to encourage all the journalists around the call. You see what we look like now. If you're here in South Africa and Cape Town at the ILGA World Conference, come up and say hello. Come up and talk to us. If you want like private quotes and all of that, please don't be scared, don't be afraid. And you know, we're more than happy to actually sit down with you and have one-to-one conversations and, you know, just elaborate on some of the things that we've learned here or things that we've given out here today. So more than happy to talk to all of you if you're in Cape Town. Thank you.
Absolutely. Just reiterating what Ymania said, both Clayton Moore and myself are available for any stories that that you may want to run, for any questions you may have about the event, with any activists and stories that you want to connect and learn more about. We're absolutely available here for you. Please reach out also if you're interested in participating in the Media Day on the Wednesday. I'm just as a final link, I'm going to share here the website for our World Conference, where you can find all the information that you may need. And yes, it's been really a pleasure for us to be here with you today. Thank you so much for intervening and for participating in this virtual press conference. And yeah, we really look forward to meeting you in person next week, and for any articles that you will write about this event, of course. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye,
Thanks, everyone.
everyone.
Take care, everyone.